So, but we go on. So the topic for today, so it was very interesting, and I saw it, I saw the post on Instagram, and I thought this is really interesting. It's sort of talk about the 5 life paradoxes a musician would sort of encounter, and it talks about, and I'm going to expand it to all artists because I've spoken, I've had this conversation with all artists before.
I'll say this, I think most of these could apply to life and business in general,
exactly.
But the last one I suspect is very pointed to the arts.
Yeah. So, you know, it's called these 5 life paradoxes. Let's go to that first image. They're the 5 life paradoxes every musician must navigate, all right? And so the first one that they have, the failure paradox. The more often times you fail, the more times you'll succeed. Our greatest moments of growth stem from our greatest failures, all right? And then it goes on to say you can't just halfway try something and fail a lot and think that success is on the horizon, but trying thoughtfully will lead to success faster than not. So let's talk about that first one for a little bit. So it's very interesting to see that because, and I think this is the point that I was making. You can come back to us now, but this is the point that I was making, doing it thoughtfully, following your dreams thoughtfully. It's true, it's a very uncomfortable feeling when you have to, the best way to learn is to actually not succeed at something or to fail at something. And it's sad to say, but I think many of our, at least my primary and secondary school experiences, it's not very conducive to making mistakes.
Yeah.
You kind of have to always get it the first, second, third time, and the reality, and it doesn't really, it's not a space conducive to the realities of failure. So there seems to be this sort of expectation of young children to get it right the first time, and this sort of also encourages this sort of anxious energy that we see a lot of young people coming up with now, especially with these students when they're watching the grades, they're watching the GPA, especially at the university level, and they're getting very, very anxious over it. And they're not used to not having it all together all of the time. And I think we need to just be a little bit more comfortable with making mistakes, but it's an uncomfortable space to be in.
The problem is, when you look at the education system, it's not geared to have any room to learn from mistakes, right? It's not geared for that. It's geared to, if you fail, you get low grades and then you have a problem, right? And it affects your GPA, which, if the GPA is not of a certain average, you have a problem. Yeah. If you don't pass a certain exam, you have a problem. It's not geared for that. And then to the point where mistakes are negative, and you could even say that at times it could be mocked. You could be looked down upon for your failures. And the problem is,
even by the people whose job is it to teach you, help you,
right? Because again, they're not necessarily. If the goal was to teach people how to think, how to be a great musician, how to be a great doctor, how to be a great scholar, how to be a great manager, what you're teaching is not a flowchart. You're teaching, you're trying to get someone to have a level of understanding and command of all of the principles and knowledge, and to then understand through various means how to make good decisions. But too often, our system of academics into entry-level jobs is just do what we tell you to do. Yeah. This is the question, answer the question. Memorization, right? There's not much critical thinking necessary depending on the subjects that you're doing. Yeah. And when you get into an entry-level position, you're not paid to think, you're paid to do. Yeah. But the problem is, how do you then develop? Because again, how many employers are willing to put up with? Because when you're trying to promote people up and up the ranks, well, what got them into the entry-level position is not going to help them be good managers. And you need to have some, obviously, if they make critical errors of negligence, then that's the end. But you need to have some facility to allow for some amount of failure, because how are you going to learn a job that requires experience if you don't give them the opportunity to gain the experience without, but once you make your first mistake, it's over.
That's it. Well, do you think that that's the difference between a job and a career? Because if it is that as an artist, I have to make a career out of myself, and there are going to be some fields that I'm going to have to go through. But if you just have a job and you're hired by someone just to do,
I think that's the difference between like self-employed and not, because even if you're doing just a job, there's still going to be more senior areas that require judgment.
Okay.
Whether it's customer
Fair.
service, management,
Fair.
problem solving, you're going to need to exercise judgment, and it's how you manage those employees without putting them down. Whereas with music, the trick with music is that it's so creative, right?
Or performing arts.
Performing arts, right? And I actually think, again, back to my analogy, it's a lot like sports in the sense of it's a performance-based industry.
Yes.
You have to perform, like, it's not just perform in the case of entertainment, but you have to perform as with regards to execution of your skills and abilities, right?
Yes.
You're in front of an audience of people, like an athlete who is in front of a crowd of people in a stadium, and there's no room. You can't go oops, right? You can't. You literally, just like an athlete can't drop the ball, the performer cannot drop the ball any moment. That moment is gone. You can never get it back.
Just as how they have practice, we have rehearsals. Just as how, and even there's even the injury thing.
Yeah,
that's especially for vocalists or pianists. So anybody who uses their hands a lot, there's
so to give a quick analogy, one of the greatest American athletes of all time, based on championships, Tom Brady in the NFL, he pointed to the fact that, look, I wasn't the most talented. I was the backup quarterback in a high school with a losing record. They still didn't want to play me. Then when I went to college, I was number 8 on the depth chart, and I had to work my way up to 4th. Then 3rd, then the backup, then I had to fight to be a starter. Then the next year I had to fight to be a starter again, right? So the point that he said was, it goes back to purposeful, in his case, purposeful practice to kind of point out what you were saying. He had to put the work in, but he also had to do it responsibly. It's not just, oh, well, I practiced for 3 hours, just doing whatever random.
Putting any necessary effort.
He had to put in effort into it.
Which kind of comes to our next one, which is called the effort paradox. All right, this is number 2, where it's like you have to put in a lot of effort to make things seem effortless, right? So they say wherever you think they're just lucky, talented, have it easy, most of the time they work super hard and behind the scenes to get there. All right, so that even comes to what you were talking about.
Ironically, I wish this was number 1 and the other one's number 2.
I know.
Because it starts with the effort, right?
Right.
But then I think what happens in business, arts, or sports, if you're winning, you don't know what you're doing wrong.
Exactly.
Because you're succeeding, right? And I think this is where artists start to drop off, because they don't realize, well, yes, we were succeeding, but why we were succeeding, we didn't fully understand, right? Same thing with business. Why did your business succeed? Circumstances could have changed, right? And with athletes, it's easier to identify this, because teams that are winning literally have a harder time kind of self-criticizing, self-determining what are our issues, where are our weaknesses. We don't know, because we're winning. So we don't know what they are. And you see this is a common thing where at some point they're no longer able to see what they need to improve, and the other teams catches up on them because they have a clear goal. Right? Whereas I guess you could say with music now, you just have to, and with business, you just have to go through the process. So ironically, this is where having this second makes sense. Part of the process is you have to not be discouraged and keep the effort up despite failure. Yes,
because people will often think that what we do on a stage seems very easy. Right? It seems it looks effortless because we have to put in a lot of effort, a lot of late night rehearsals. There's a lot of prepping before and after rehearsals.
Yes.
There's a lot of doing your practice on your own. So, and just as a PSA for everybody, the difference between the word practice and rehearsal. I go home and I do my individual practice. And then we come together and we rehearse what we have individually practiced.
You're supposed to practice on your own? Well,
oh, yes, sure. You're supposed to practice on your own.
I am not a professional. I was never a professional entertainer.
But you still put in the work.
Not on my own.
But there's another another point that I wanted. Well, you see that before I get to my next point, that's where efficient management of your organizations is important, because if your rehearsals is a space for people to only come there and practice, and it's accommodating to to the bare minimum, then people will only put in the bare minimum. But if you set a standard, then people will rise to the occasion eventually.
I just like to point out, I was not at the level of bare minimum, all right?
No, he wasn't.
Okay, I just want to say.
But there was another clip that I saw, and it sort of rang out for me. This person on an Instagram video, they said, very gifted people, very highly intelligent people, talented people have an issue with effort, and they see effort as a threat. And let me explain what she means.
I think, yeah, you might have sent me this, yeah.
Yeah, and when they feel, and I've seen this before, when you have the bright primary school and secondary school student, they don't have to put in effort,
yes,
because it comes naturally to
yes,
them. At least that level, the specific intelligence level that the school is looking for. But when you come out into the real world or tertiary level education, especially as artists, when we have to put in effort in so many different ways, rather than just accomplishing an assignment, but rather putting in the effort for rehearsals and then having the strength and the discipline to balance everything, because you have to. When you're a university student as an artist, you have your courses, you have your assignments, but you also have your songs to learn. You also have your ensemble rehearsals to go to, and on top of that, you still have to balance it with all of the stuff that you're doing outside. So you don't really get a lot of time to yourself. And some of them are, especially year ones, year twos, they still have a struggle with that. I remember I had an issue with that. So when you have to put in effort, it seems like a threat because, oh, I'm not as great as I thought I was. So then some either go two ways, well, three ways. They drop out and they do something else.
Right.
Some are still in it, but they do everything to a mediocre level intentionally.
Because they're coasting.
Yeah. So they're like, if it's not coming naturally to me,
I'm not going to fight it.
I'm not going to fight up with it. And then this is why...
Which is not always a bad philosophy, just how it's applied in this case is negative.
And then there are some people who... This is why people have a problem with further education, because education humbles you.
You don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you.
And then the next thing is the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know.
Yeah.
So, but then some people take it, they humble themselves, they step all the way down, they come down from there, and then they say, you know what, if I have to put in effort, it's okay. Because that is what this requires, right? Because when you think about it, just to paint a little bit of picture, the UE students, we have all of our performances happening this week and next week. The Festival of Plays, their theatrical performances were all this weekend and upcoming. You have to do that on top of the other assignments, on top of the research courses that you have, on top of the academic writing English courses that you have to do, because they want to produce, the goal is to produce an all-rounded, not just an artist, not just a talented person who can do this, but somebody of academic quality that is able to do research, performance, education once you graduate. But in the secondary school, yes, you love the music. That's all you do. But then there's something that happens in the teenager's brain where you're like, I'm only going to do music, so I don't need to worry about all of these other things further on. I'm sorry? You do. You absolutely do. Right?
Yeah. Let me just put it bluntly. Why do you think some athletes and artists go broke? Because they only studied their sports or their art, and they didn't study the business side, or, I don't know, an ethics course, a law course, a management course, a communications course, not how to sing, but how to talk. Yeah. Right? And they get, I mean, how many athletes and artists, actors, singers, the parents, the management stole from them millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, because your skills are lacking all around.
And other things. And that's why even when we do an elective on the BA level, they encourage us to do communications. Choose it as because it's important for what we do. It kind of comes to the next one, and I'll link it as we have it up there. It's called the approval paradox, right? When you stop seeking approval, you gain more of it, right? All musicians have creative validation, being good enough or being seen as elite. But the more you try to fit into the mold or do what everybody else does for validation, the less likely you are to stand out or be seen, right? Be you, find confidence in yourself. Yes, it is hard, and the approval will come without even trying. So it's just this sort of thing of,
well, you still have to be good.
You still have to be good, but people won't approve. Well,
yeah, if you literally if you sounded, acted, danced, and looked like Michael Jackson, you'll just be the guy trying to look like Michael Jackson, right?
Right.
You still have, the more you are, but good, there's...
Well, this comes back to be doing it thoughtfully and with some level of effort, because are you just doing it for what people will say, or are you doing it for the overall development of yourself and the craft itself?
So this is where it's like 50-50 with business, because sometimes you have to follow the market, and sometimes you have to try to find your own niche, right? Or there's greater opportunity being your niche, similar to an artist. Now, oftentimes, the business side of it wants to index on, no, let's follow the trends. And that's where you get cookie cutter commercial, right, sort of stuff. But the flip side is, think about most of the artists who kind of stand the test of time and are memorable, right? They have a certain je ne sais quoi about them. If they are like, say, a rock band from the 80s or the 70s, right, or something like that, where you might not realize that they stand out, but they stand out for whatever reason. Or they might be an act like Madonna, Lady Gaga, or even to go to the other side, Sting, who have very discernible differences, right? Whether it's presentation, style, genre, and what have you.
Don't compromise it.
And they don't compromise that at all.
Things.
And artistically, for whatever they prioritize, it holds up, but also the execution level is there, because when Lady Gaga is friends with Tony Bennett, it's not that she's a pop star, she's a musician that has the respect of musicians.
Exactly. And I think this sort of links to, if you want the quick commercial fix, as opposed to longevity in your art.
The quick commercial fix is the lower effort approach.
Yes.
Because you just have to follow.
Yes.
You don't have to pioneer.
And then you're not able to stand the test of time, right? And then some of these things tend to come back and bite you when you get older.
Sometimes you're before your time, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're before your time, and your art form is like, this person would have been so much better 10 years later because of the trends.
Yeah.
But then now the question is, if they were better, maybe they could have made the trend.
Possibly. But something else that bites really hard.
Let's go quick in these last two ones.
Something that bites really hard, the money paradox.
Yes, that definitely, this definitely is in line with business.
Yeah,
right?
So
definitely.
For sure. So the money paradox is basically you have to lose money to make some money, whether it's your instrument, your education, a move, paying to audition, or filling the holes in how to make a living as a musician that music schools don't provide. And they don't. You have to invest before you see reward, right? Here's the important part. Invest in things that will double, triple, or quadruple your investment. So yes, have a great instrument, have a great education, but also invest in things that will teach you how to make a living with your great instrument and great education.
This is where mentors, and you've said this before, so I'm kind of stealing from you, like Dr. Brown is important, right? Because you don't always know. Like in business, if I knew what would quadruple my investment, everybody would just pick that, right? And they say here, double, triple, or quadruple, because it's a bit more subjective. But the point is mentorship, getting someone with the experience. In all fields, it matters. In sports, in business, in anything. But music is one of those kind of weird things, maybe even more than sports, where there's a lot that you have to figure out in the moment. Because there's an industry, but it's not like a sport where the business side is systematized, right? What is the value of your art versus his art? Now, I do the same sport. I play the same position as person X. I run, we could measure how fast I run. Am I faster than him? Am I slower than him? Am I stronger than him? There's so many things we could measure in sports to compare me to him. I have the same level of accomplishment as him statistically, so I should get paid as much. You do a different genre to this other guy. How do we compare that? Right? You're not doing soca in TNT. How do you put a value to that? What is the fair market value to that? What it should be? So it's hard to then know how to invest, like you don't have a dollar figure to put on these things to figure it out. So you need someone experienced that understands these things intrinsically.
One of the things that I've actually learned, I had to learn to adjust my relationship with money, because I grew up with either sides of the spectrum where there was a culture of hold on to every bit of it as you can, and then there was the other one of spend as much as you can. And I've had to sort of find that balance in between, because in order for more to come, there's a philosophy, there's a life principle, you kind of have to make room for more to come. But you also have to be very thoughtful and responsible that you don't spend it all out.
Yeah, COVID taught us that.
Yeah, exactly, precisely. So when you have that, you really need to adjust our relationship with money. Now let's get to the very last one, which is the most important for me, because I'm going through this right now. It's called the opportunity paradox, all right? Take on less to do more. When a young musician, when you're a young musician, you should try a bit of everything. Teaching, playing, admin, non-music work. It's only by trying that you find your passion. But, in all caps, once you find what you enjoy doing the most, start curating what you say yes to. A full calendar looks great, but a calendar filled with really cool, fun, selective things that you can do excellently is even better. So story time. So when I was young, obviously, started doing everything, trying every bit of it, mainly because I was moving from a place of, I made the decision about music late, right? So I did sixth form, I was a science student, that sort of thing, then I took a year off. And I just sort of tried to feel my way through things. So I was trying everything because in my mind, I was trying to make up for lost time. Then I realized as I got older, that's not a thing. So I always thought that I was behind. And so I tried and I tried and I tried. I've experienced some things. I've experienced many things. And being in different roles and different positions. And now that it feels weird saying this, but I'm 28 and I have started saying no a little bit more often to what I do and to how much I involve myself in certain things. Why? Because I've realized a lot of the stress that I experienced has a lot to do with saying yes just for saying yes sake. And I'm at that point where I have to sort of start curating what I say yes to. We had Siobhan Brathwaite on in season 1, and he's talked about the difference between building a career and chasing one. So if you're chasing one, that means, you're just hungry for any and everything, and that means you'll say yes, even if it sort of betrays you or betrays who you are as an artist.
Yeah.
If you're building a career, you're very intentional, you're very thoughtful, you're very specific and conscious of the type of life that you want to make for yourself. And I remember having this conversation with one of my former lecturers. I said, listen, I can't do this anymore. But I did tell her, admittedly, I thought I was making this decision. I thought I would be making this decision in my 30s. She's like, well, you're only 2 years ahead of the time, so why not? And she had to reassure me there's only one you, right? So you can't say yes to everything, right? When you're in your 20, 25, 26, sure, maybe. But then I'm going through this transitional period where I can't do any and everything anymore.
Now, in the business world, this is not always pertinent, but it can be because it comes down to job performance. A lot of businessmen, they dabble in a lot of things. And I think this all comes back down to sometimes your job performance as an artist, as a businessman, will suffer if you stretch yourself too thin. That's why it's important to pull back, because what's the point of doing 6 jobs if they're all mediocre and you're not going to have a future with any of them? No good referrals, nothing. For media, it's very, very, very a lot easier to see direct parallels with artists, because media personalities, it's a performance-based industry, right? It's a live entertainment industry to some extent, or a live performance, not always entertainment, but even if you're doing news, it's still to some extent a vocal performance, right? And you could easily get caught up with having a schedule that's too full and run into some of these same problems. This is where the effort talk is kind of a catch-22, because it's like max effort, well, but not so that you run yourself into the ground.
So thoughtful effort.
Right. The thing is, and for an example, someone who does what I do with a daily show that deals with politics, if you want to chase a career, you might try to find a spot in a political party and get a political appointment as soon as possible.
Right.
But then the problem is, what are you selling out to do that? Because you start off being objective, and all of a sudden you kind of put some of that off to the side to appease your new employer, your new boss, right? So as opposed to building the career of, if my whole thing is being objective, I have to be willing to stand apart.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to join, I have to guard my objectivity because that's mine. That's what I don't have intellectual property of a score, of a play, of a script, of a piece. It's literally me and my reputation. It's the closest thing I have to, and that's not a lot. That's very little bit.
You are technically the product.
Technically the product. That's only such a good product, right? Before it's questionable.
I'll be honest. So sometimes, and we're going to wrap up very, very soon, but I'll be honest. When you have that thought to yourself, my initial thing was, Mark, who do you think you are? Like, you're now turned 28. You're not even close to...
This is the catch.
That's the thing. But then that's the little gremlin in your head saying...
It's not just that. I think there are students who should have... Everybody should, to some extent, have that thought. The whole, I'm a private person and this thing doesn't matter. I run a red light. No. Your reputation is built off of who you are every day and and what you practice, who you practice to be every day.
But what I mean by that also is, like, who do you... Like,
self-importance?
Yeah. Like, who you think you are saying that, you need to say no more, no a little bit more. Yeah. But then this is the importance of having mentors, as we said. I was speaking to one of them and they said, listen, if this is the decision that you need to make, here's what I will say. Is it going to affect your career in any way? Not really. The person has had enough experience to sort of guide me in that direction.
When nobody knows you, saying no might be bad.
Yeah.
But at some point, you've reached a point where people start to know you. The thing is, here's the catch. More people will ask of you. Yeah. So that's what makes it an ever-growing problem that is not sustainable.
And then there's the thing of people like, you should take our ass. Well, then stop asking me. but then it's the career, and so I have to make the choice for myself.
The other thing that I realize, and maybe part of this is an excuse to not put too much, 100% effort in where I should, but doing a daily show, I've now reached the point where it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Okay.
So I can't be on sprint mode every day.
Yeah, no. That's stressful.
And it's the same thing for you. Like, you've reached the point now where you've got your degree, you've made up a name for yourself. Now you need to not let your quality drop.
Right.
As opposed to trying to network with any and everybody and agree to everything. Because if your quality drops, that's all, it goes to nothing.
And that's the life paradoxes that we, as artists, and all careers, especially in media and communications, that's what we face. Trinidad and Tobago, ladies and gentlemen, we have to take a quick break to invite our next guest, but stay tuned, we'll be back.